Hall of Fame inductee. Blake, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Chris. I'm good. Thanks for taking the time, my man.
Thank you. So to start off, Blake, you'll be inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame this December alongside legends like Nick Saban and Michael Strahan. When you get called in January, what what thought go through your head?
I mean it it's still surreal, right? I mean, it's still I think a little surreal, Chris, and I've been lucky enough to be on the ballot. This was my either 11th or 12th year. So, um at some point, maybe it's like a defense mechanism or something, but at some point I think after a few years, the first couple years of being on the ballot, you're excited. You're waiting for the announcement to come out to kind of like cross your fingers, see if you made it. Um, and then after 4 or 5 years of not making it, yeah, I think for me at least, I think I started to like, kind of not pay as much attention again, just mostly as a defense mechanism because the way it works, Chris, is with the College Football Hall of Fame, they have a class of somewhere probably between 12 and 15 inductees every year, but um, they usually only have one of those inductees from a small school like St. John's, for example. And when I say small school, I mean anything that's non-major Division One. So North Dakota, North Dakota State. Um, last year the inductee from a small school was Randy Moss from Marshall. And so, with the kind of the odds being only one every year, I was like, God, man, I don't. I mean, maybe I'll make it, but I might be dead by then, and so I, you know, personally, I just kind of like went from being really excited about being on the ballot, and then after several years of not making it, kind of like, um, you know, trying to temper my expectations maybe and protect myself a little bit. Uh, and so I kind of like put it in the back of my mind, over the years. And so to finally get the notification that you're going to be inducted, I mean, uh, it was surreal. It still is surreal. And then to have, the class of individuals going in the hall with me is pretty wild. I mean, these are people that are a huge part of what we consider American football.
You said that many dominoes to you, had to fall to get to had to fall for you to get to this point, both good and bad. Can you walk us through one or two of those pivotal moments that shaped your path to Collegeville?
Yeah, I mean, when I hear that, Chris, I think the biggest thing is, I was really a late bloomer in high school. I was actually probably a higher recruited and more sought after basketball player. I was more interested in basketball than football. Um, and my goal was coming out of high school and my senior year was to be offered a preferred walk-on spot for the Gophers basketball team, University of Minnesota Gophers basketball team. And unfortunately, and I guess I'd say fortunately, that didn't come to fruition. It ended up not happening, and that really got me thinking that if I can't play major like Division I basketball, then I didn't want to give up. I didn't want to give up football, even though I like basketball more. I didn't want to give up football. But you know, physically I wasn't very big. Mentally, I wasn't really confident in the like physical elements of football coming out of high school. And so it wasn't an accident that I played football at St. John's, but it really was like just this idea that I'm just not ready to give it up. And so going to a smaller school like St. John's allowed me to play two sports, um, and not have to give up football, because if I had to give up a sport at that point in my life, I would have given up football and focused on basketball. And so, that's one, huge domino. And then for us to have um, the success that we did at St. John's, and St. John's has always had this culture and history of being good in football, but to have teammates that I had, and for us to, in my 4 years at St. John's, my freshman year, we lost in the national championship game. My sophomore and junior year, we lost in the national semifinals. And my senior year, we won the national championship. And none of this happens without having a lot of team success. Football is kind of the ultimate team sport, and if St. John's is 5-5 every year and not making the playoffs and kind of an average MIAC team, there is no way that I would end up with the accolades that I did individually. So I'm just thankful that went to a program like St. John's that was so established, and then was there for a time period with really talented teammates that allowed us to be as good as we were every single year. I can obviously only speak for myself, but I think it's true for a lot of my teammates is we really just liked each other. We had such good team chemistry. And again, it's a credit to what, the late John Gagliardi had built, and the current coach Gary Foshing, and a lot of the coaching staff that's still there today was around when I was back then. They just built this beautiful ecosystem where you enjoyed, I enjoyed every aspect of it. And I truly mean that. Like two-a-days, I love two-a-days. People kind of roll their eyes and think of two-a-days as being like this necessary evil for football, and how they hate it, and it's so physically demanding and all these kind of things. Man, two-a-days I think was some of the best times of my life. I loved film sessions. I loved working out and lifting with my teammates and the coaches, practices, and obviously games. And so when you create an environment where you really enjoy all of that, it doesn't feel like work. It doesn't feel like work to have two-a-days where you're on campus in the facility for 8 or 10 hours that day. It doesn't feel like work when you're watching, an extra hour of films. And so I think that, the environment and the culture that was created where you really just loved being with those guys and connected with that group in such a meaningful way, and then it's like, when it comes time to play the games, and when it comes time to get in the playoffs, you just don't want it to end, right? Like you just don't want it to end because it's something that is so fun and enjoyable. And that if you're not very good, the season's only 10 weeks. And if you're really good, the season's 15 weeks. And to some degree, it's as simple as that, is that I think, we just didn't want it to end because we liked being with each other and being in the program.
Take us back to that championship game against Mount Union. You had that game-breaking 51-yard touchdown run despite battling a hamstring injury. What do you remember most about that moment?
Yeah. I mean, I think just the game in itself, a couple of things stick out to me. Number one was, we knew Mount Union to some degree, right? So that helped because we had barely lost to them my freshman year in the national championship game. My sophomore year, we lost to them in the national semifinals in Mount Union. My junior year, we lost to a team from Texas in the national semifinals. But if we were to beat them, we'd have played Mount Union in the national championship game. And so playing them in the national championship game, number one, we knew them. And number two, like, I guess in my opinion, it couldn't have happened any other way. Like, it just felt like we had to play them to, kind of slay the dragon a little bit, and so that team, which I think it still is a record, that team, if they would have beat us in that game, would have been their graduating class would have been 55-0. They would have had the first undefeated graduating class in the history of NCAA football. And so they were 54-0 coming in against us. And also that team, I can't remember exactly who they played in the semifinals, but I think they won like 72-9 or something like that. I mean, they just destroyed the team in the semifinals. Um, you know, what I said about that game and what I continue to say about that game is, we end up winning, I think like 24-6 or something like that. And it wasn't a fluke. We're a better team than them. It wasn't like we went out and just played like this perfect game. We played pretty well. I think they played okay. But I think we beat them 7 out of 10 times. It wasn't like, oh, the 1 in 100 perfect game that we beat Mount Union. We were the better team than them. We were better than them on offense, defense, special teams, and so that's one of the biggest things that sticks out, and specifically about that play. I had been playing. I was a wide receiver, but I played more in the backfield, especially during the playoffs, as a running back, and really just kind of like an effort to kind of get the ball in my hands more often. And but I still wasn't like super experienced. I didn't have a lot of reps and years in me of playing running back, and so it was in my role as a running back had evolved from um, being a wide receiver and getting these like jet sweeps and reverses and things like that as a wide receiver to getting some plays out of the backfield. But when I got plays out of the backfield early on, it was always going to the outside. Again, I'm not a very experienced running back, and then it evolved even further relatively quickly to getting running back plays inside the tackles. And that's a different experience when you're a running back running up against the interior defensive lineman, and there's some big dudes, and it just is all of it's just so different. And so this was an inside running play, and I got the ball and like instantly got hit by a pretty big dude, and luckily enough was able to kind of like spin off of him, and then hit the hole, and it was like to some degree a foot race. And luckily for me and my hamstring, because I was not 100% at that point, the foot race was between me and a linebacker. And so I was able to kind of outrun a linebacker. I probably wasn't going to be able to outrun a defensive back or a safety at that point in the season, just because I was nursing my injury. But and then running, I was like, I just didn't want my hamstring to pop. I mean, you're running full out, and I'm like nursing this hamstring, and I'm like, God, just don't give out. And so that was a great game. It was fun.
Your brother's accident led you to a career in disability services. You co-founded DOMA, a health and human services company. How how has that experience shaped who you are today?
Yeah, I think that you I think as you mentioned with earlier in the interview with your comment about like how certain dominoes fall, and sometimes a domino falls, and you might perceive that domino as like good. That was a good domino, or that was a bad domino. I mentioned earlier, but I didn't ultimately end up getting an offer to be a preferred walk-on for the Gophers. I perceived that as a negative when I was a high school senior. As a 22-year-old college senior and as a 44-year-old today, like that was something that happened for me, not to me. And the fact that I didn't have that go down that road, directed me to St. John's, and led to a lot of amazing things. And with my brother's accident, there's a lot of things that you could very clearly say are terrible and tragic. But from it, I found a vocation. For me personally, I found a vocation that I love and that I'm passionate about, and that I'll do for the rest of my days. And so that is a blessing for me. And something that not only I can like feel like I contribute to this world in some way. But it also is a way for me to honor my brother.
Last question. Being back here at Clemens Stadium where you made so many memorable plays, what emotions does it bring up, and what do you hope St. John's fans remember most about those championship years? About those championship years.
Uh, I mean, I think the biggest thing that I think of when I think of that time in my life is, again, going back to just relationships, just the amount of relationships that began during those 4 years, and the depth of those relationships, and now the longevity of those relationships. I mean, it feels like this tree, like that grows and blooms over time, where the base of the tree is St. John's and my time there, and then over the course of now 25 years or whatever it's been, all these relationships have kind of bloomed from that. And these are people that I've been in business with. These are people that have like been in my wedding. These are people that are still to this day great friends or mentors of mine. And so the amount of um, the amount of foliage on that tree is just so impressive to me. And then the roots of that tree are so deep. Like these are not superficial relationships. These are meaningful, long-lasting relationships. And so um, that's what I think about when I think of those times. And the great thing about that is that memory doesn't have to be like a distant memory, because those relationships are still ongoing. Those relationships are still part of my everyday life, and impact me very meaningfully every day. And so in terms of what fans and remember about that time, um yeah, I would say maybe the sustained success that we had over that 4 year period. I think that we won something like 50 games um, in those 4 years. Again, we made it very deep into the playoffs every year, and we're like a strong contender to win the national championship every one of those 4 years. And so, what I hope fans would remember is that that we had that time, but also I hope that they remember that we can get back there, right? I think that's Gary and all the coaches and all the players and everybody involved in St. John's is like, how can we get back to being that program that every year is going to the national championship, winning one, maybe losing in the semifinals, but making really deep runs in the playoffs every year. And I think we're not very far off from getting back to that kind of era. And so that I think that would be the biggest takeaway.